What if a millionaire's worst moment in public happened right in front of you? His card declined, his pride shattered. But then, the impossible happened. And it came from a little girl. Stay with me, because this story will change the way you see money, kindness, and life itself. And if you want more stories like this, subscribe to Millionaire Breakthrough so you never miss the next one. The restaurant was buzzing that night, filled with the sound of glasses clinking and laughter floating from table to table. In the middle of it all, a man walked in with the kind of presence that turned heads instantly. He wasn't just another guest, he was a millionaire, known in the city for his fortune and the way success seemed to follow him everywhere. People noticed him, whispered his name, and some even straightened in their chairs, as if they were in the presence of someone above ordinary life. He carried himself with the kind of confidence that only comes from years of being admired and respected. His tailored suit, polished shoes, and the way he greeted the staff made it clear he was used to being treated differently. Tonight felt like another evening where the world was his stage, and he was the star everyone secretly envied. For the diners who watched him, it was a show. Some smiled in admiration, others with a trace of envy, imagining what it must feel like to walk into a room and immediately command it. There was something magnetic about the way people leaned toward him, almost as if they wanted to catch a fragment of his world. Everything about the moment whispered perfection, the kind of life most people only dream of. He ordered his meal with ease, his voice calm and steady, and the waiter nodded quickly, clearly aware of who he was serving. Around him, the conversations seemed to soften. People didn't want to miss what was happening at his table, almost expecting something extraordinary to unfold. For a while, it seemed like the evening would roll on as smoothly as the glasses of wine being poured. But here's the thing about appearances. They can be fragile, shattered in an instant when life decides to test you. As the plates were served, there was a feeling in the air, almost unnoticeable at first, like a shift no one could explain. The kind of feeling that makes the back of your neck tighten without knowing why. Something was about to change, and no one in that room could have guessed how far it would go. The millionaire didn't notice it yet, of course. He smiled, nodded politely at those who made eye contact, and carried on as if the night was his to control. His confidence, his charm, his reputation, they all stood tall like walls around him. But walls can crumble, and pride can fall, sometimes faster than anyone expects. And while he thought this would be another flawless evening to add to his story, the truth was waiting just around the corner, ready to turn the perfect into the unforgettable, for reasons he could never have imagined. Because in a matter of minutes, his worst moment in public was about to begin. The waiter returned with a polite smile, holding the small black folder in his hands. The millionaire barely glanced up, expecting the same routine he'd experienced countless times before. Card swiped, receipt signed, evening wrapped in perfection. But then, the waiter cleared his throat, hesitated for just a second, and spoke words no one in that room expected to hear. "Sir, I'm sorry, but your card was declined." At first, the millionaire chuckled softly, waving it off like a harmless mistake. He reached into his jacket, ready to offer another card, convinced it was just some banking error or a machine glitch. But the silence that followed was different this time. The waiter stood frozen, avoiding eye contact, as the weight of the moment began to settle. The air shifted. Conversations at nearby tables grew quieter, as if everyone instinctively leaned closer. People didn't need to hear the exact words. They felt the tension, saw the hesitation in the waiter's hands, and sensed something had gone terribly wrong. The millionaire's face stiffened, his jaw tightening as he tried to maintain composure. Inside, though, his blood ran cold. This wasn't supposed to happen. He was the man who never failed, who lived above problems ordinary people faced. A declined card was not just an inconvenience. It was humiliation, an invisible crack in the image he had carefully built for years. He quickly offered another card, his movements sharper now, less confident. The waiter nodded, but the unease in his expression betrayed him. In that moment, the entire restaurant seemed to hold its breath. Every second stretched longer, every sound sharper, as if the whole world had paused to watch the fall of a man who was never meant to stumble. And yet, this was only the beginning. because what came next wouldn't just bruise his pride. It would tear apart everything he thought he controlled. The night was about to explode into something far beyond a simple payment issue. The second card slid through the machine, and the screen blinked again. Declined. This time, the sound seemed louder, sharper, impossible to ignore. The millionaire's face flushed, and though he tried to smile, the weight of the moment pressed down on him like a storm cloud. Around the room, whispers began to spread. A couple at the next table leaned toward each other, trying not to stare. Someone at the bar smirked, their eyes fixed on the man who once commanded respect without speaking a word. For years, he had been untouchable. His money, his power, his status shielding him from ridicule. But here, in the middle of a crowded restaurant, that shield shattered. Humiliation crept in slowly, then all at once. Every rustle of silverware, every glance that lingered too long, became a reminder of his sudden fall. He could almost hear their thoughts. How can a millionaire not pay for his own meal? Was it all a lie? The air grew heavier with judgment, and no amount of charm could mask the truth spilling into the room. He straightened his posture, forcing his chin high, as if pretending nothing was wrong could erase the scene. But deep down, his pride trembled. For a man who measured his worth by how the world saw him, this was not just embarrassment. It was a nightmare unfolding in real time. And yet, as harsh as the whispers felt, this was only the surface of what awaited him. Because the night was far from over, and the humiliation was about to cut even deeper. The moment felt endless, but then it sharpened, pierced by laughter. A table nearby couldn't hold back their amusement, mocking what they had just witnessed. The sound wasn't loud, but in the millionaire's ears, it roared, echoing louder than every whisper in the room. Each chuckle was like salt on an open wound. The group at the table exchanged glances, their grins widening as if his fall from grace were some kind of entertainment. For people who had once envied him, this was a chance to feel taller by watching him shrink. The laughter traveled, rippling through the restaurant, until others joined in with smirks and knowing looks. It wasn't just about the declined card anymore. It was about watching a man who had always been above them stumble in the most public way possible. The millionaire clenched his fists beneath the table, his jaw tight. He wanted to vanish, to disappear into the leather of his chair, but there was no escape. The noise grew, suffocating him, until the sound of glasses clinking felt like mock applause for his failure. And yet, amid the noise and humiliation, someone else was watching, not laughing, not mocking, but staring with wide eyes filled with something entirely different. It wasn't pity, it wasn't scorn, it was curiosity and maybe even courage. In that moment, unnoticed by everyone else, a small presence began to stir. A presence that would soon change the course of the night in a way no one could have predicted. The millionaire lowered his eyes, no longer able to meet the stares around him. For years, money had been his shield, his armor, the thing that commanded respect before he even spoke a word. But now, with a single decline, that shield had shattered, leaving him exposed in a way he hadn't felt since childhood. The leather chair beneath him no longer felt luxurious. It felt like a trap, holding him in place while the world judged him. Every second stretched, heavy and suffocating, as though time itself had slowed down to make the humiliation last longer. He thought about all the rooms he had walked into where people stood just because he arrived. He thought about the handshakes, the smiles, the admiration that came so easily when his wealth defined him. And yet here he was, unable to even lift his head, as if all that glory had been a dream fading into nothing. Shame settled in his chest like a weight he couldn't push away. It wasn't just embarrassment. It was a reminder of how fragile respect really was when it was built only on power and possessions. For the first time in years, he felt like he was no one. Around him, the whispers softened, almost replaced by silence. But the silence didn't bring relief. It brought something even more piercing. It was the kind of silence that made every heartbeat echo like a drum, reminding him he was completely alone in that room full of people. And then, just when he thought nothing could cut through that moment, a sound emerged. A voice, small and gentle, but clear enough to break the suffocating silence. A voice no one expected, least of all him. All eyes turned to her, though no one had seen her approach. A little girl, maybe 8 years old, stepped forward with a quiet determination that didn't match her small frame. The chatter in the restaurant seemed to pause, and the usual hum of activity faded into a tense hush. Her eyes were wide, focused, and unafraid. People exchanged confused glances, unsure why such a tiny presence would dare enter a moment that had been so humiliating for a man of wealth. It wasn't just curiosity. There was purpose in her steps, a kind of bravery that made the room hold its breath. The millionaire lifted his gaze, startled, unable to understand what was happening. He had never been approached like this, especially not in a moment where his world seemed to be unraveling. The courage radiating from this small girl felt almost impossible, like a sudden light cutting through shadows he thought would last forever. Each step she took echoed softly against the polished floor, but to the millionaire, it sounded louder than any applause he had ever received. There was a pause in his chest, a moment where pride, shame, and surprise collided in an unrecognizable mix. The diners, once amused and mocking, were now silent. Some held their breath. Others leaned forward slightly, sensing that the night was about to take a turn no one had imagined. The room seemed to shrink around them, all focus on this small figure moving with remarkable intent. And then she stopped, just a few feet away from him, her gaze unwavering. Everyone waited, unsure of what this tiny girl would do next. The tension was electric, heavy enough to make the silence feel almost alive. Because what happened in that moment wasn't just unexpected. It was something no one in the restaurant would forget, something that would forever change the millionaire's understanding of value, humility, and human connection. The little girl held out her tiny hand, and in it rested a single coin, worn and shiny from being carried around for days. She had saved it carefully, the kind of carefulness only a child with purpose can understand, planning to spend it on a small treat. But tonight, that coin was meant for something far greater. The millionaire blinked, unsure if he had seen correctly. For a moment, disbelief froze him in place. The room seemed to fall silent around them, every sound fading as people realized what was happening. It wasn't just a gesture. It was a quiet act of bravery and kindness that no one expected. The coin gleamed under the soft lights, a symbol of innocence and courage that contrasted sharply with the power and wealth surrounding it. The simplicity of it struck him harder than any luxury car or banknote ever could. In that instant, tension that had gripped the room shattered like glass. Whispers started quietly, spreading through the restaurant, but no one dared to break the fragile magic of the moment. Eyes softened, jaws loosened, and even those who had been mocking moments ago felt the shift. Something pure had entered the room, and everyone felt it. The millionaire reached out instinctively, but his hands trembled. Pride and humility warred within him, as the smallest act reminded him of everything he had forgotten. Empathy, compassion, and the power of simple human connection. People looked on, stunned, realizing that a child, small, powerless by societal standards, had just given him more than any of his money ever could. The gesture carried weight far beyond its size, something that could pierce through pride and touch the heart in ways no luxury ever had. And yet, as powerful as that moment felt, it was only the opening chapter of a story far bigger than anyone in the room could imagine. What followed would test him, change him, and reveal truths he had buried long ago. He stared at the coin, frozen in disbelief, his mouth slightly open, but no words could form. The laughter that had filled the room evaporated, replaced by a stunned silence. Even the whispers faded, as if the restaurant itself were holding its breath, waiting for the next moment to unfold. Something inside him stirred, an unexpected, unfamiliar sensation. It wasn't pride, nor was it embarrassment. It was a raw, aching feeling he hadn't encountered in years, buried beneath layers of wealth and control. Memories, long suppressed, began to surface, creeping into his mind with a force he couldn't ignore. Images of his childhood flashed before him. The modest kitchen, the coins counted one by one, the feeling of scarcity pressing down on him like a shadow. He remembered nights of longing, the quiet shame of wanting what others had, and the desperate hope that one day, he would never feel that powerless again. The coin in the little girl's hand acted like a key, unlocking doors he had thought were permanently closed. Emotions he had worked so hard to suppress, vulnerability, humility, gratitude, rose to the surface, creating a storm he wasn't prepared to face in public. He swallowed hard, his eyes meeting hers briefly. There was no judgment in her gaze, only clarity and innocence. And in that clarity, he felt something he hadn't in decades. The raw, humbling truth of what truly mattered. The silence in the room intensified, each diner sensing the shift in energy. The man who had commanded respect through wealth alone was now exposed, stripped down not just in front of others, but in front of himself. Every heartbeat seemed louder, every breath heavier, as the weight of the moment settled in. Yet, even as memories and emotions surged, he knew this was only the beginning. The little coin, small and simple, had awakened something much larger within him. Something that would change everything he thought he knew about value, kindness, and human connection. As the silence hung heavy in the restaurant, memories from years ago began to whisper in his mind. The millionaire had long buried them under walls of success and luxury. But now, each memory felt closer, sharper, impossible to ignore. Childhood mornings of empty cupboards, evenings spent counting coins, the ache of wanting something he couldn't have, all resurfaced with an almost physical force. He remembered the fear of being overlooked, the sting of being judged for having nothing, the longing to prove he was more than his circumstances. Those feelings had driven him, motivated him to climb higher, to acquire wealth that seemed untouchable. But they had also created a blind spot, one that had kept him from understanding simple human gestures, like the one he had just witnessed. The coin in the little girl's hand acted like a mirror, reflecting a side of himself he had worked hard to forget. Suddenly, the man who prided himself on being untouchable felt small again, vulnerable in ways he hadn't felt since childhood. It was uncomfortable, humbling, yet strangely liberating. He glanced at her, the tiny girl who had unknowingly opened a door he thought had been locked forever. Her simple act of kindness had bypassed his wealth, his status, his power, and gone straight to the part of him he had kept hidden even from himself. Around them, the restaurant remained silent. Even those who had mocked him earlier now watched in awe, sensing that something monumental was unfolding before their eyes. It wasn't just a child helping a man. It was the beginning of a transformation, subtle but profound. And yet, for all the emotions and memories that had surfaced, the biggest revelation hadn't arrived yet. The room seemed to lean forward in anticipation, the tension growing, because what was about to be revealed would change everything he thought he knew about his life and his past. The millionaire's heartbeat quickened, a mixture of dread and hope coursing through him. He knew that this night, which began as public humiliation, was about to become something far deeper, and that the little girl had unknowingly become the key to it all. The restaurant held its breath as the millionaire slowly lowered himself to kneel before the little girl. Every eye followed the unexpected gesture, a mix of awe and confusion spreading through the diners. No one had imagined that the man who commanded respect with wealth would show such humility in public. He looked into her eyes, searching for understanding, for a reason behind the bravery she had displayed. Then, quietly, he asked the question that held both gratitude and curiosity. "What's your name, little one?" His voice trembled slightly, betraying the flood of emotions building inside him. The girl paused, as if sensing the weight of the moment. When she finally spoke, her words were soft, yet they carried the power of a revelation no one in the room could have predicted. "My name is Emily." The word hit him like a lightning bolt. Emily. The name resonated deep within him, stirring memories he had thought were lost to time. A childhood friend, someone who had been part of his struggles long ago, someone whose kindness had once left a mark on his young heart. His pulse quickened. The connection was undeniable. The coincidence, or perhaps fate, of this encounter left him breathless. The little girl, who had saved a coin for candy, was the very symbol of the compassion and innocence he had once cherished, the embodiment of the lessons he had nearly forgotten. Around them, the atmosphere shifted. The diners, sensing the invisible bond forming between the two, grew silent with anticipation. Respect returned not for his wealth, but for the human connection unfolding in front of everyone. Yet even with this revelation, the night held another twist. Something more was coming. Something that would deepen their bond and reveal a story that went far beyond a simple act of kindness. Just as the millionaire tried to process the shock of the little girl's name, a woman entered the restaurant. Her presence was quiet, yet commanding, as if the universe had arranged her arrival at the perfect moment. The room seemed to shift again, sensing that another piece of the puzzle was about to fall into place. She approached, eyes filled with warmth and recognition. The millionaire felt a strange mixture of curiosity and apprehension. He hadn't seen her in years, but something about her presence stirred memories he thought were long gone. Memories from a time when life had been a daily struggle. The woman spoke softly, almost reverently. "You don't remember me, do you? But we met a long time ago, when you were just starting out, when no one else believed in you." Her voice trembled slightly, carrying a weight that made the millionaire's chest tighten. Suddenly, the coin in the little girl's hand revealed its true significance. It wasn't just a gesture of kindness. It was a bridge to the past, a reminder of the very moment that had shaped his ambition and resilience. The simple act of generosity carried a deeper meaning he hadn't anticipated. He stared at both of them, realizing that the universe had a way of connecting threads he had thought were lost. This wasn't coincidence. It was a reminder of where he came from, the struggles that had molded him, and the people who had quietly influenced his journey. The room around them seemed suspended in time. Diners watched in awe, sensing the layers of history and emotion unraveling before their eyes. The millionaire felt humility wash over him, a humbling contrast to the pride that had defined him for so long. Yet even with this revelation, the night was not over. One final twist remained, something that would seal the lesson of the evening and leave everyone, especially him, forever changed. The atmosphere in the restaurant shifted dramatically. Those who had once whispered and snickered now stared in awe, their expressions a mix of disbelief and newfound respect. The tone had changed completely, and it wasn't his wealth that commanded it this time. It was the story unfolding before them. People realized that the display of kindness from a child had revealed more about the millionaire than all his fortune ever could. Respect returned, not because of money or status, but because of what had been uncovered. A depth of humanity they had never anticipated. The millionaire's face softened, his posture still trembling slightly with the lingering weight of humiliation, yet now tempered by gratitude and understanding. For the first time, he felt seen, not for his wealth, but for the person he was beneath it all. Whispers circulated quietly, but now they spoke of wonder rather than mockery. Some diners exchanged glances, realizing that life's lessons often come from the most unexpected places, and sometimes the smallest gestures carry the heaviest weight. The child's simple act had transformed the energy of the entire room. Laughter, once cruel, had turned into quiet amazement, as the diners processed the layers of humility, history, and human connection that had just played out in front of them. And yet, as the room celebrated this unexpected transformation, the millionaire knew deep down that this night would linger in his memory forever. It was not just an evening of public embarrassment turned awe. It was a night that had reshaped the way he would see life, people, and himself. Even as the energy shifted and respect returned, he couldn't shake the sense that something more profound had been revealed. Something that would continue to guide him. Long after the restaurant emptied and the lights dimmed, the millionaire slowly stood, his body still trembling from the emotional whirlwind of the evening. He took a deep breath, the kind that carries more than air. It carries acknowledgement, humility, and a readiness to face truths he had long avoided. Every eye in the restaurant followed him, waiting for what he would say next. With a voice that quivered slightly, he spoke. "I've spent so much of my life chasing wealth, believing it could define me, protect me, make me untouchable." The words came out raw, carrying the weight of years spent in pursuit of success that had left him blind to simple human connections. He paused, letting the silence linger, giving everyone a moment to absorb what he was admitting. This was not a show of pride or ego. It was a confession, a vulnerability that few had ever witnessed from someone in his position. "I forgot what truly matters," he continued, his eyes meeting the little girl's. "I forgot kindness. I forgot humility. I forgot how to see people, not as opportunities or transactions, but as souls with value beyond money." His words struck the room with a force stronger than any fortune he had accumulated. The diners felt it too, the shift from judgment to empathy, from amusement to reverence. His confession was more than words. It was an awakening, a turning point that transformed not just him, but the energy in the room. Yet even with this admission, the story wasn't over. The lesson wasn't complete. The little girl's act had opened a door, but what would follow would cement the change in his heart and reveal the full meaning of the night. As he stood there, vulnerable and honest, everyone sensed that the most profound part of the evening was yet to come. Something deeper, a promise of true redemption, was waiting just beyond the next moment. The millionaire knelt once again, looking the little girl directly in the eyes. His expression was serious, filled with sincerity and determination. "This isn't about money," he said softly. "It's about creating a chance for children like you to have opportunities that everyone deserves, regardless of where they start." The girl's eyes widened, a mixture of awe and disbelief sparkling within them. She had expected a simple thank you, maybe a small treat, but what he offered was far greater. A vision, a promise that could change lives long after tonight. Whispers rippled through the restaurant. Diners felt a swell of emotion, some eyes glistening with tears, as the magnitude of the gesture became clear. This was no ordinary act. It was a declaration of change, of giving back in the truest sense. The millionaire continued, describing plans to support education, mentorship, and opportunities for children in need. Each word built a bridge from his past struggles to the futures of those who would benefit, a chain of kindness that began with a single coin and a child's courage. The atmosphere shifted completely. Laughter, judgment, and skepticism were replaced by awe, inspiration, and hope. Everyone present felt the ripple of his promise, understanding that real wealth isn't measured in money, but in the lives we touch and the legacy we leave. Even as he spoke, the room felt charged with emotion, as if the restaurant itself acknowledged the transformation taking place. The little girl's simple act had not only redeemed him in that moment but ignited a movement of purpose that no one could ignore. Yet, even with this monumental promise, the night still held one last message. A final truth that would imprint itself on the millionaire's heart forever, completing the journey of reflection, revelation, and transformation. As he stepped out of the restaurant, the cool night air wrapped around him like a gentle reminder of reality. The millionaire paused for a moment, looking at the coin still clutched in his hand, a small, unassuming piece of metal that now carried immeasurable weight. For years, he had equated success with money, believing that wealth could solve every problem, command respect, and bring happiness. But tonight had shattered that illusion completely, revealing a truth far deeper than any fortune could provide. He thought back to the little girl, to her courage, innocence, and simple act of kindness. That single gesture had pierced through layers of pride and arrogance, reaching into the very core of his heart, igniting a change he never anticipated. Every memory of wealth, power, and status now seemed shallow in comparison to the lesson he had learned. Genuine kindness, humility, and empathy were priceless, and no amount of money could ever replace them. The coin, once just a coin, became a symbol of everything he had forgotten, and everything he now vowed to honor. It was a reminder that even the smallest, most unexpected acts can leave a mark that lasts a lifetime. He smiled softly, a rare, unguarded expression, feeling lighter, more grounded, and deeply grateful. Life, he realized, was about connection, compassion, and the moments that define who we truly are, not the wealth we accumulate. As he walked away, the millionaire knew this night would remain with him forever. Every step echoed a new understanding. The greatest treasures in life aren't bought. They're felt, shared, and remembered. And sometimes the tiniest coin can teach the biggest lesson. And that's the story of how a millionaire's worst moment in public turned into the greatest lesson of his life. True wealth is not measured in dollars, but in compassion, kindness, and the people who stand by us when everything else fails. If this story moved you, share it with someone who needs to hear it today, and don't forget to subscribe to Millionaire Breakthrough for more powerful stories that will change the way you see money and life.